Okay, gonna give this a go. The ninth episode of our Guadalupe Media and Culture. Um, as I presented earlier in the previous video, the theme of las idiomas como un tema para charlar sobre las relaciones dentro de una cultura que pertenece a los idiomas. Y cómo mezcla bien estas o cómo lo mezcla en cómo ha estado en la historia. Y quiero empezar, fue interesante una mujer, de una de mis experiencias, una mujer ha mencionado cuando estuvimos con el padre ahí en la parroquia que hay que agregar una misa en inglés para mí. Para mí no pasa nada, normal, la misa es la misa. Y bueno, quiero empezar con la liturgical language. What is liturgical language? It's defined by the Catholic Dictionary as the languages that are used by the Church in her official worship. It can be said with certainty that no evidence can be found to establish the fact that Christ ever commanded the apostles to use any particular language in the celebration of the mysteries. Of course, the celebration of the mysteries of the sacrifice, the Mass, mysteries of the most Holy Trinity that we honor, praise, adore, and give thanksgiving to and petition to during the holy sacrifice of the Mass. That was a little jumbled, but yeah. And on the contrary, scholars agree that the cult language should correspond with the vernacular language, and the history of this and its development with the Greek, thus changing to the Roman Latin language that many of us celebrate, though there is somewhere around 19 Eastern rites and 2 Western, more or less. So a question of languages and the importance of language in the human person and the way it speaks to our heart, the way that man gives worship to God through their language. And for many years, this didn't raise difficulties. Languages is noted here, which is kind of interesting to think about. Maybe why these difficulties came about or were arisen in the differences of the languages. But the apostles it goes on to say, the apostles and their first successors celebrated the liturgy in the language of the faithful. That is to say, in the language they used to instruct people, since their preaching did not extend beyond the limits of the countries where the languages were spoken. We may conduce that the liturgical languages and the vernacular were the same. So good to know. Though we can look at the importance of Trent, but also maybe more emphasize in the Eastern rites of the vernacular corresponding to the liturgical language. And certainly the importance of the language coming from the importance of the scriptures. It says here that it was necessary to follow the language of the liturgy that was also the language of the scriptures. So that intimate connection between the way that God chose to speak to us through using human authors as instruments for the Holy Scriptures, and continually wanting us to be instruments for his kingdom, though we should all be edified by the church as well. So liturgy is public worship and social and cooperative act, both in the etymology and the true sense. So speaking about language there and its presence within the liturgy, its importance. Think about how we speak to others. Many of us give praise to others through language that should first of all ultimately be towards God. But also with this different languages, also understanding that different heresies and that were passed on through local languages. But liturgy was celebrated in as many tongues as there were people converted to Christianity, is what it said for the Eastern churches. But interesting, in the 12th century, a canonist by the name of Balsamon mentioned that after quoting some scripture about the language of the liturgy, that those who do not know any Greek shall celebrate in their own language, provided they use correct copies of the official prayers translated from well-written Greek scrolls. Many of us may use the Roman Missal with the Latin and the English translations, or Spanish, depending on the community or place that you live. But just the dominance of kind of the Greek culture that was before a lot of the changes of liturgy that came about. Kind of this Hellenization, the adoption of the Greek culture, religion, and language and identity by non-Greeks. But thinking about how this candice made the importance of those in their local language having copies of the official prayers translated from the Greek, and this is also a practice that has been maintained by the Holy See in our modern times, as we can see that happened with the translation of the liturgy in the Second Vatican Council. But that's a little comment on the languages in the liturgy and in the church. And something else that was recently mentioned in a men's group was the 5 love languages. And an article from mindbodygreen.com talks about these love languages and the 5 love languages being the 5 different ways of expressing and receiving love. And the 5 being words of affirmation, quality time, receiving gifts, acts of service, and physical touch. And it mentions this article that not everyone communicates in the same way, and likewise people have different ways of prayer, or different ways they prefer to receive love. And this concept was developed by Gary Chapman, a doctor, in his book, The 5 Love Languages, The Secret of Love That Lasts, where he describes in this book the 5 unique styles of communicating love that I had just mentioned, or that were just mentioned. Categories he distilled from his experience in marriage counseling and linguistics. So important just how different people connect in different ways there. Linguistics being, of course, there's a scientific study of language and its structure, and how love pertains to that. If we even think back to the liturgy, we offer our love to God, coming through that language, and here through our brothers and sisters, through one spouse. The 5 love languages. It's the importance of the greatest 2 commandments, right? To love God and to love our neighbor. So continuing on in this article, it says that we all may relate to most languages, but each of us has one that speaks to us the most. And that's from a marriage and family therapist, seasoned one, is seems, from Sonny, this doctor named Sonny. Great name. Hopefully there's lots of sun where you're at today. But he goes on to say, discovering you and your partner's primary love languages and speaking that language regularly may create a better understanding of each other's needs and to support each other's growth, which we all want to do, of course. And just to end this commentary here on the 5 love languages, just to wrap it up quickly, or here at the end, and just the relationship between different cultures, even, and how love languages relate. Even if we think about Latin America and the United States, maybe some Latin Americans would say we're cold, even in our greetings. Many here in Guatemala and different Latin American countries greet each other with a kiss or some form of physical affection or some form of greeting. Other in the United States, we tend to have different practices as well. But just to expand on that, this commentary says, I personally believe it also depends on gender, culture, customs, and values. This is from Mohammed Saeed. I'm not sure if he's a doctor or not, but I assume, or I would think so from the article and all its quotations from doctors. But he goes on to note that certain love languages, which are prevalent in the West, are much less common in non-Western cultures. It's kind of that, maybe that greeting, that physical touch, words of affirmation, though gifts, and I think some have said that the pineapple is the sign of Christian charity. It's a nice gift to bring to someone if you are going to visit their house or you've been invited over. At least that was recommended or was commented on before for myself. But and interesting here in Guatemala, just some more about the languages here. Got this nice map. Maybe I can show it. It's a little bent, but from the trip. But Mapa Linguístico de Guatemala. See the camera there. Okay. But the nice colors of the 21 different languages, idiomas mayas, mentioned by the Academia de Lenguas Mayas de Guatemala, an organization that of the state that regulates the use, the writing, and the just putting out these different languages that exist in the lengua mayanese. This family of languages that exists, Comunidades Lingüísticas Mayas, and just 21, I'll list them off here. El Achi, Aketeco, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing all these right, but there's a group in the United States, in Los Angeles, that speaks this language, and Ahuacateco. I think I'm butchering this, I should have looked it up. And there's a group in County, Ohio, El Chiorfi, El Chu, El Itza, Ixil, Jacalteco, Cachiquel, Quiche, Mam, Mopan, which Mam, going back, is the third most spoken language of family of languages. La tercera más hablada de esta familia. Mopan, like I mentioned, Poco Mam, Poco Machi, Kean Hobal, Sacapulteco, Sipaquepense, Tiqueteco, Sutuhil. Again, Tiqueteco, mentioned before, Sutuhil. It has an alfabeto de idioma Tectiteco, tiene 32 grafemas, 27 consonantes y 5 vocales. One of the few that was mentioned here in this document. Sutuhil, Uspanteco y Quechí, which is el idioma con mayor extensión territorial y cuarto en cantidad de hablantes detrás de castellano, el quiché y el cachiquel. So interesting, certainly, to think about. As mentioned there, Quechua is the fourth most spoken language after Spanish, Quiché and Cachiquel. Think about the relationship between the Spanish cultures and the different cultures where people speak these languages, and also as then I think maybe that can be connected to the liturgy and the different ways that or different modes that existed in different languages. So lots of mixing and relationships between cultures, but important mentioning here, I think, is that it's speaking about these languages as a family. La familia lingüística mayense. So distinct languages, distinct cultures, all existing within one country. Certainly a unifying principle. Seems great to be mentioned here. And also in terms of cachiquel, which many people speak here, it seemed, which was the second most spoken, as mentioned before, but that la mayoría de los hablantes de cachiquel es bilingüe de la lengua nativa y español. Pues dinámica relación entre los dos. Quiero terminar con una poema de este libro. Voy a abrirla por una que no sé qué va a ser, pero aquí, página 88, de Marden, este libro de sonetos de la luz y de la esperanza, de un Bernardo Alfaro Palacios. Y diga esta corta frase: en nuestro interior está la energía divina, que desde el interior nos sustenta y anima. Feliz día y hasta la próxima. Siempre damos gloria a nuestro Señor Dios y a nuestra Madre, que cuida este canal, y todos ustedes, y gracias para todo. Chao.